On their way back from visiting Hermione, who was recovering in the hospital wing, Harry and Ron heard Filch yelling at someone and rounded the corner to find a flood of water seeping out of Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. The boys stepped inside to investigate and immediately spotted a diary bobbing in the toilet. They examined it and saw the name T.M. Riddle written on the first page, but the rest of the pages were blank. Ron remembered the name from his trophy polishing detention as the boy who was rewarded for special services to the school 50 years ago. Harry felt a strange familiarity to the name, and so he pocketed the diary. They showed it to Hermione when she was fully recovered, and she concluded that Riddle, who was commended 50 years before, must have caught the heir of Slytherin, who had opened the Chamber of Secrets 50 years before. She tried to make words appear on the pages, but with no success. At the beginning of February, the school had become calmer. Nobody else had been attacked, and the mandrakes were becoming moody and secretive, entering adolescence and soon ready to be made into an elixir. Lockhart believed he had intimidated the monster into hiding, and by Valentine's Day, he was in such a cheerful mood that he decorated the Great Hall in pink and organized a troop of dwarves to deliver Valentine. The dwarves were not quite as cheerful, however, and an embarrassing encounter occurred when a dwarf had to kick through the masses, knock Harry's bag out of his hands, and ultimately sit on Harry's ankles in order to deliver him a singing Valentine, sent, we are fairly certain, by a nearby, blushing Ginny Weasley. Once Harry had gathered his things and left the laughing crowds, he noticed that all of his belongings were covered in his spilt red ink, all except Riddle's diary. This puzzled Harry, and he retired to bed early that evening and pages through the diary. He wrote his name on a page and watched it disappear, and suddenly the ink rose up again, forming the words, "Hello, Harry Potter. My name is Tom Riddle. How did you come by my diary?" This began a dialogue between the two boys with oddly similar appearances and pasts, separated by 50 years and connected through this secret diary. Riddle wrote that he was in fact awarded his medal for catching the person who had opened the chamber, and he invited Harry to visit his memory. Harry agreed, and within seconds he was blown into the pages of the diary to the headmaster's room. There he witnessed a conversation between Riddle and the then headmaster in which Riddle's request to remain at Hogwarts for the summer holidays was turned down because of the recent dangers of the open Chamber of Secrets. Harry then followed Riddle through the corridors, once running into a younger, auburn-haired Dumbledore who warned Riddle to head back to his dormitory. Riddle and Harry waited in the dungeons for a long time, and finally, they heard and followed nearby footsteps. The footsteps belonged to a younger Hagrid who was trying to conceal something inside a box. Riddle explained that he must turn Hagrid in for possessing the guilty monster, and Hagrid argued vehemently that the animal inside the box was innocent. Riddle pulled out his wand, casting open the box and releasing a giant, hairy spider that scuttled over him and out through the corridor. Harry was whirled back into real time, back into his dormitory, and he began to tell Ron what he saw. Harry, Ron, and Hermione spent endless conversations discussing Harry's jaunt into the diary and the possibility that Hagrid could be the culprit. The three students debated asking him, but decided against it at least until another attack occurred. Meanwhile, the school term continued. The mandrakes were still maturing, once delighting Professor Sprout by throwing a wild party in their greenhouse, and the Hogwarts second-year students were busy choosing their classes for the following year. Ron and Harry signed up for the same few classes, while Hermione signed up for everything offered. Things were surprisingly normal during this time, and soon the Hufflepuff-Gryffindor Quidditch match drew apace. The evening before the big game, Harry was startled to find that his dormitory room had been broken into, his things torn, broken, and rearranged, and Riddle's diary taken. He and Hermione were alarmed to conclude that a Gryffindor must have done it, as nobody else knew the house password. The morning of the match, Harry heard the hissing, disembodied voice again, and Hermione leapt up and dashed to the library. Harry headed out to the Quidditch pitch, and no sooner than he had taken his position did Professor McGonagall step into the field and stop the game, instructing all students to return to their houses and Harry and Ron to follow her to the hospital wing. There, they found Hermione and a girl named Penelope Clearwater, petrified, with a small hand mirror lying next to them. The students all were told to remain in their house common rooms from 6 p.m. on, and always to be escorted by teachers to and from class. Professor McGonagall added that the school would likely be closed down unless the attacks were halted. Ron and Harry decided that this was a moment to visit Hagrid. Because of the strict rules about wandering around unchaperoned, They decided to do this underneath Harry's invisibility cloak, a gift left to him by his late father. The boys set out late that night, and as soon as they entered Hagrid's small wooden cabin, they heard a knock at the door and hid invisibly in a corner. Dumbledore entered with a man Ron immediately recognized as Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic. Fudge explained apologetically to Hagrid that in light of the present circumstances, he must ask him to leave Hogwarts and reside in Azkaban, a frightful wizard prison, until the events stopped or were solved. Dumbledore stated calmly that he trusted Hagrid entirely, but Fudge said that he must act or else the Ministry will think he is doing nothing to stop the attacks. And since Hagrid's history was muddled with rumors about the Chamber of Secrets, he should be the Ministry's first target. While this was being discussed, the door opened again, and Lucius Malfoy entered, explaining icily that the 12 school governors have signed a petition calling for Dumbledore to step down as headmaster. Dumbledore consented without argument, saying only these portentous words: "You will find that I will only truly have left this school when none here are loyal to me. You will also find that help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it." Hagrid left more reluctantly, calling out behind him 2 instructions heard by Harry and Ron: to follow the spiders to find the culprit and to feed Fang, his dog. As spring continued to sweep through Hogwarts, Harry found it increasingly difficult to take his mind off the terror inside the castle. He pondered Hagrid's advice about the spiders and Dumbledore's about help and loyalty, but he was unsure of how to proceed with either. Meanwhile, Malfoy seemed delighted by the state of things. He boasted that his father had finally gotten Dumbledore out, and he suggested that Snape apply to be the new headmaster. In herbology class, Ernie Macmillan apologized for having suspected Harry, since after the attack on Hermione, he now believed that Harry would never have been responsible for hurting a good friend. Harry accepted the apology, and minutes later during the same class, he spotted a line of spiders moving toward the Forbidden Forest. He whacked Ron with his pruning shears, and Ron looked doubtful at the prospect of following them. They headed next to Lockhart's defense against the Dark Arts class, during which a confident Lockhart gleefully waxed on about the safe state of the school now that Hagrid had been removed. Ron and Harry were extremely annoyed, and after the joint events of Lockhart's accusation of Hagrid combined with a glance at Hermione's empty seat, the two agreed to follow the spiders that very night. Beneath the invisibility cloak, Ron and Harry set out into the forest with Fang scampering nearby. They soon spotted a few solitary spiders scuttling deep into the forest, away from the paths, and so they followed them for a long time. Eventually, they heard something large moving behind the trees, and they were greatly relieved to see that it was Ron's once flying car, the Ford Anglia, that hit the Whomping Willow and now was running wild in the Forbidden Forest. The boys laughed at their initial fright and prepared to continue when they and Fang were met and captured by a trio of clicking, horse-sized spiders. Ron, who feared spiders above all else, was speechless with fear, and Harry himself was terrified too. The spiders carried them into a clearing with a giant domed web, where they were met with an elderly blind spider, Aragog, who first dismissed Ron and Harry to be killed, but then spoke with them when they claimed to have been sent by Hagrid. The boys learned from Aragog that the school thought he was the monster within the chamber, but really he had been given to Hagrid as an egg and raised in captivity. They learned also that the monster in the chamber was the creature most feared by spiders, and because of that its name was not spoken. They learned finally that the creature's victim was found in the toilet, and that soon after the event, Hagrid set Aragog free in the forest. After informing them of this, Aragog instructed his children to eat the humans and dog. For a moment, Harry and Ron knew that they were doomed, but then all of a sudden they heard a horn and saw the Weasleys' car rumbling over to them. Panicked, they opened the door, shoved in Fang and themselves, and fled the Forbidden Forest. Once they said goodbye to the car and headed back up to the dormitory, feeling discouraged at having found no new clues. Only once Harry was back in his bed did it occur to him that the girl found in the bathroom 50 years back could be none else but Moaning Myrtle. This is the end of part 3. If you liked what you heard, please press like, leave a comment, and subscribe. If you didn't like what you heard, thank you for watching this long. See you soon on Books Recapped.